What's up, Warren? How you doing?
I'm doing pretty well. Thanks, Will.
Cool. I cut my intro a little shorter this week because I just kind of assume, and maybe this is a bad assumption on my part, that people know which podcast they're listening to because they had to click on it, and so I felt like it was kind of redundant to say, "Welcome to the Adventures in DevOps podcast."
Yeah, but you just did it. So
Right? That was
you
subtle,
just
though,
did it,
right? That
right?
was clever. I'm gonna
uh,
just pat myself on the back for that one.
yeah, nice job there. I've got actually an interesting fact that I can share. So we can jump into that. There was an OTP provider that actually changed hands, similar to the XE vulnerability in compression in Linux not too long ago. And for those of you that don't know what OTP is, that's one-time password. So you can think of like an auth app that you've got installed in your phone. And it's sort of ridiculous that this even happened because if you think about how bad it is for a open source library to get co-opted by a malicious attacker to have an application on your phone that is also responsible for security for two-factor auth codes to change hands means that provider now has access to every single one of those users two-factor auth, and it could be even primary factor if it comes to password resets or whatnot. So that's a great way of stealing credentials, and I don't think it's an attack vector that a lot of people think about. I think it's like whatever, it just stores my two-factor codes, doesn't really matter. But now there's actually a huge problem that could come up because of that.
Nice. I look forward to it. I'm just excited about that.
I think everyone really has to switch over to WebAuth, and that's the true secret. And if you don't know what that is, come and talk to me after the show. I'm happy to give everyone an earful about that.
Or can we just give up on it and just everyone uses password all lowercase letters for their password? I mean, there's some credibility to that approach, right?
There's a whole episode there in itself, I think, that I don't want to get
Maybe.
into.
Maybe. But today's episode, we're talking about one of my favorite topics, incident response and on-call management. And to chat through that topic with us, we've got Falit Jain, the CEO of Pagerly, joining us today. Falit, welcome.
Thanks for having guys. Happy to join on this and have a great discussion about incident response and on-call stuffs.
Right on, cool. I feel like incident response is a learned skill, and it's learned on the job, under pressure, when everything's going to hell. And prior to your first incident, you never even thought through that this is where your life was going to lead. So, how did you end up starting a company dedicated to this incident response?
It began with like when I just started out my first job basically, and I was part of Amazon and in the detail page team, which is primarily one of the highest sort of pages in terms of traffic, if you consider. And and that was like the first hand experience. I like my manager put me on call like within sort of months of joining, and he told me like, hey, this is like the best way to learn about things. And I kid not, like that was some serious pressure, I would say, in the initial, at least in the initial stuff. And and since then I've always believed, yeah, this is the best way to sort of learn things because you are absolutely learning each and every bit of things in the shortest possible amount of time. So I think that was my first, I would say, interaction with the incidents and the on-call world, like
Well,
how.
let's be realistic there. Your manager's thought process was actually, if this guy's going to quit, I'm going to make him quit sooner rather than later. So I'm putting him on call right at the beginning.
I,
Could be. It could be. I think it was probably just telling me, hey, this is how you test waters here. And but yeah, it was pretty sort of a new world. Before that, I always thought like, yeah, software development is more about building stuff and maybe designing it. This part is truly what we say of management or managing your maintaining your product, and that was like the first kind of interaction I had with this one.
Right on. Cool. So then you went from Amazon. After that, you went to Disney, right?
Yeah. So I think like in Amazon it was pretty interesting, like detail page and like there were sort of quite a few days, especially during Prime Days and Cyber Mondays, and the Christmas week is always like pretty high pressure stuff. And I remember each and every one of them, like in terms of the events, like even if there's like a small blip, there's like I think so many teams on a single bridge in even in different locations, and everyone just giving their status updates each and after time. And it was like it was almost like I would say like a war room. People I think have now started to tagging on-call rooms as war rooms, like everyone giving their status updates and what's the update, and it go on for quite a few nights. So that was I think like pretty interesting. In the Disney, it was on the other way around. Like our major events in Disney were the live streaming. So in India, we had cricket as our major sport, and we used to live stream cricket, and we had around 20 million concurrent viewers also at some point of time. And with that scale, each and every bit of system, from starting from web to CDN, even to a load balancer, even to a small Kubernetes file, to even to maybe our caching systems, everything gets tested a lot. So for us in Disney, that was our major priority. How to manage our on-calls response, incident response, and on-calls during the live streams, because we cannot even afford to go for a minute down, because we know how much stake the live events are for the company.
Well,
So
especially when you're talking about like live streaming cricket to Indians, because y'all
yeah,
take that seriously.
yeah. We, the broadcast contracts are for billions of dollars, and let's if we go for down for a couple of minutes, we're literally losing money at every point of time. And we can see the Twitter, we're just trending on Twitter. Hey, like your app is down. What's happening and what's not? So we need to be very very careful. How to respond publicly also, and how to quickly bring things up in a way that it can last at least during the live event also. So, so those were like I'd say the most, the closest I can be to a customer at that point of time, and the most engineer can be at a like a highest pressure point. So yeah, so that was my Disney stint, and post that I've started out with PageAD.
Right on. Yeah. So I think after that, you're kind of committed at this point.
Yeah.
You're just your career path is now incident response after those two stints.
Yeah. So interestingly, I think the two companies had slightly a different way of handling response, maybe because of the company size or team sizes. But overall, I think that the concept way, like everyone was leading to a single sort of a goal, where we wanted to reduce the same incidents again and again. At least that's our primary goals. And I see what I saw in the two stints, like the primary part of the incident response is the process. Like how do you sort of set up the processes? How do you enable your engineers to follow these processes and assist them? I think like as an engineer, as a developer, uh, that's why we call on-call like as an operational part. Nobody wants to spend a lot of time on it. Like everyone wants to maybe code, develop features, maybe even design, architect, even blog nowadays. But on-call is the last part. Like everyone wants to spend time, and it's the most grunted work, especially if they are like work after work related to bugs or incidents. So that's where I saw a lot of common patterns across incident response, even in the on-call management. I saw like we there can be a lot of tools or automations or even assistant agents which can help the engineers. So that's why I kind of started with Pagerly, which is helping the teams to assist their incident and on-call management.
Yeah, I think that's a solid point that's often overlooked. I work a lot with early stage startups, and it's a pattern I've seen over my career. Like the biggest part of incident response happens before you ever have your first incident because you have to talk through like what are we going to do when this actually happens? Who are we going to bring
Yeah.
on? How are we going to carry out communications?
Right.
And so yeah, I think that's a solid point. I like the fact that you mentioned that there's multiple ways of doing that. You know, there's not one
Yeah.
right way.
Right. Right. So there, I would say like the first part is like you need to sort of realize, yeah, the time has come in my organization that we need to have this setup. Uh, I what I've usually seen it all, I would say 90% of the times it comes down from the top leadership. If you have like CTOs or VPs, depending on the organization size, if those folks have come from a place where incident response or on-call processes had been in place, they bring that culture into the company because they have realized value over the time of these processes. In companies where they have not, like usually organization take a longer time to realize, yeah, we need such processes. So that's the first part to is to realize like, hey, these are the processes we need so that we can at least reduce our issues in a longer frame of time. So that's the first part. The second part is then to set up that on-call roster. So on-call rosters is something like now that is something that which is very dependent on org to org. Some organization wants to have a centralized on-call team which kind of handles everything. Like let's say even if it's like a web issue, they do it. Even if it's like an infrastructure issue, they handle it. And people have different ways of setting them, maybe like one person from each team or just one person every week, and they do it. Some organizations have dedicated on-call team for each of their separate teams. So and they kind of rotate in weekly, bi-weekly, monthly manner. So that's the other part. The second part is to set the on-call process, on-call roster. And I think then organization takes some time until the on-call rosters get settled and they start, debugging tickets. And after some certain amount of time, then they go into the setting up the incident response part, which is the postmortems, as well as figuring out, hey, like these are the sort of our general kind of steps we take to solve an issue. These are the certain workflows that we do. Now let's try to streamline this both in the response as well as in the postmortem process, as well as in the postmortem analysis. So that's what we have seen organization go from step A to step to last part is the postmortem.
You said something really interesting, I think, which is I haven't worked at any company so far, and even my own at Authorus here. We have some process. It isn't like we don't do anything when that happens. And maybe it's because we're a tech focused or software focused company, and that's pretty much where I've worked. But the part that you said that was really interesting for me is that software engineers don't like on call. And,
Yeah.
I am. I want to challenge that, or like I want to live in the world where it's not a problem. It's like why do people not like it so much? Any thoughts about that?
And it's because people as engineers or developers, they don't consider as part of the building process. Like we love to build, we love to architect things, but once we have done that, like then we don't want to sort of go in and fix out just one tiny part of it which is actually causing the major issue. But going there, fixing part of it, and probably just taking blame also, because sometimes people kind of have that kind of bias also, like, hey, my product is like bug free, or my product is like super great. So and going there and fixing this, as well as you already have a lot of other work going on, you have sprints and in this agile world. So that's where people don't, that's where software developers don't want to spend a lot of time on it.
Do,
So
mm,
that's what happens.
you think it's not like well prioritized or rewarded? Like if you do on-call work, you're not rewarded for it. If you write bugless code, you're not rewarded for it. So
Yeah.
whatever. I don't
Yeah.
want to do it. It's going to happen, and then I have to pay the fine because of it, and
Yeah.
I don't get the benefit.
Yeah, I think like benefits and all, like can probably be sort of be defined by the engineering managers or team leads if they want to sort of reward or they want to highlight, maybe, like, hey, the person has solved these many tickets or these many incidents, or maybe find a better way of, rewarding developers who actually solve a lot of incidents. But yeah, I think, like, in general sense, like, since it's not part of the building, it's more on the
Yeah.
maintenance part. That's the, I think, the major belief. Software developers don't like incident
Yeah, no, I
times.
totally get it.
Yeah, I don't like on call because it's never my code. It's always something else.
Yeah,
Well, I mean, that makes me
that's
think there's
always the
something.
case.
Yeah, no, I totally get it. I mean, I feel like there's something fundamentally broken there. Like I've seen that where I worked at one of the previous jobs that was 20, 50 engineers that were all
Yeah.
rotating through the same on-call schedule, as if
Mhm.
somehow code, just because it was all in the monolith, if something was broken, I somehow would magically know what was going on and say, I don't
Yeah.
know, products or logistics code when I had
Right.
nothing to do with the development of it. Like like it might as well be like some foreign, like I don't know, Aramaic or cuneiform to me. Like I
Yeah.
have no idea what that was going on there at all, and yet somehow I
Right.
have to come in and debug or find out what the problem was.
Right. Right. Yeah. I think, like, in Amazon, this was a case. Like, there's, like, the entire, I would say, the detail page was kind of at that point of time like that, and and that particular sort of service or page is, like, maintained by more than 150 software engineers, and so, like, most of the times you are debugging something that we you have not coded. So, and you're debugging, let's say, 3 a.m. in the night, and you're already frustrated, like, you don't know what's happening. So that's why I think some bit of frustration do come from it. And
What
that's where I think, like, good processes can sort of somehow mitigate some of the pain points, especially like institutions like this.
was the expectation at 3 a.m. that software engineers should be able to log on and identify the problem and push out a fix? Like that seems like there's something that would never actually have like actually worked out in practice.
It did, like, some, so, like, it kind of depends. So what kind of systems that you have in place? So one part is to maybe mitigate. Sometimes mitigation can be done just to maybe revert a last deployment. Like, that's the one mitigation people generally have. But let's say even that is not done, you probably need to sort of page the person who has probably, added that line of code and take help from him or her, or you maybe have certain, like, a IMOC team or something like that, which can sort of, orchestrate and collaborate with a lot of different on calls or different developers to sort of mitigate the and put a, like, a patch or fix the issues right there. So this kind of, like, depends on, how you have set up that incident response process itself.
Yeah, I think that's a really good distinction to make there. That like during an incident, oftentimes the primary goal is to mitigate the problem, which is different
Yeah.
than solving the root cause of the problem. So, like
Right.
if we're on an outage or an incident, like we might mitigate the problem by launching 15 more Kubernetes pods with just
Absolutely.
insane amounts of memory just so we can ride through the problem till we're able to figure out the root cause and test that theory and then deploy a fix for it.
So just so I got you right, Will, your strategy for incident management is turning it off and back on again.
Absolutely. 3 times. Always reboot 3 times.
Yeah,
How-
I think, like in live stream, our one of the major kind of our last hack was to, hey, just put the live stream on and don't maybe don't have a paywall or something like that. So that can be one. Or even in Amazon, they have kind of different scenarios that you can set. Like, okay, even if fixing is taking time, even if mitigation is taking time, maybe do something. Maybe just put that I to cart button there. There was a certain process that you had in place. So as you said, like just increase the Kubernetes pods, and at least the your customer is not facing that issue for the moment. And then use that time to mitigate to actually fix the issue.
How do you decide what mitigation strategy makes the most sense? Like, if you like, I feel like we're in the case of the world now where we're going to automate whatever it is. So if
Yeah.
we have some number of failures, do we just immediately start deploying extra pods? Do we immediately try to roll back to a previous code version? Like, can we even know up front what the right approach is there to automate? Because the last thing I want, I feel like, is someone to get online and after half an hour be like, you know what, maybe we should deploy some pods with an insane amount of memory that will solve all of our problems.
Yeah, yeah. I think like it's interesting because like as a engineer, like even if you have some familiarity, you would know. Okay, like probably this is the issue. Let's say if you're seeing a memory leak, then pod increase makes a sense. But let's say if there's a something else, maybe you're seeing a lot of 5x6. Now, probably the pod increase might not make a sense there. Probably reverting to a previous version might make a sense there. So I think you need to have some bit of familiarity, with whatever system that you are handling it. In case you're not, then it becomes like a huge challenge. As I was saying, then you probably don't know, what to do. So I think I think some familiarity is needed at least to have that first mitigation step, at least in mind.
I think that alludes to an entire skill set in software engineering of how to troubleshoot.
Yes,
It's
yes,
because like debugging when you're writing code is completely different, I think, than troubleshooting a live system and all of its different dependencies and trying to figure out where the potential problem might be and how do you get some faith in that theory and then do something to mitigate it.
yeah, yeah. I think like couple of techniques that we have seen and we had kind of deployed. One is maybe do a shadow on call. Like you do on calls. Like someone is handling the on call, but let's say if there are major incidents, you shadow them so that okay, like these are tools. Like even I've seen sometimes people don't even know like these are dashboards that you can refer to and which will probably help you more. So reaching out to people, shadowing them definitely helps, especially whenever there's an incident or an issue in a system which you have not yet touched. So that is one. Other bit is what we had done was we had done Chaos Monkey a lot. So Chaos Monkey, like a concept, I think probably generated in Netflix engineering team that you kind of have like game days where what you do is like certain infrastructures you just put it down. Let's say you put it down like a replica of a, let's say, Postgres DB, and and see how your engineering team is performing after that. What's how much time they are just taking to mitigate or at least mitigating the issue. What's their MTDR? What's how they are fixing it? How they are communicating? How they are collaborating? Are they putting the right communication to the right stakeholders at the right time? So those kind of events, those kind of practices have helped, especially when you have not done for a long time. So Chaos Monkey helped us a lot, especially prepping for large events, and especially having like a proper collaboration sync with other teams, because that's also what is needed. You do it within your team, but you also have to do it with, let's say, your maybe front end team or maybe your DevOps team. You need to do in sync to mitigating issues sometimes. So there are techniques to do that so that like right context and right information also is like the right education is also done for whoever is coming on to Omicron.
I often wonder how much these things provide value. Like where along the spectrum is the right time to start implementing, say, a game day where you're taking your own
Yeah,
stuff down, or the simian army to inject faults into your architecture or infrastructure. Like I see a lot of companies that I could say, hey, you know what? That's probably not the highest value thing.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
they're
yeah,
like
yeah.
they have so many other problems that I think they should tackle first before they're ready to do that. But then on the opposite side, I'm thinking, wait, like if they did this, they may actually identify critical problems within their infrastructure that could cause
Yeah.
them multi-day downtimes or multi-week downtimes, which would have more catastrophic impacts in the long term. Uh, like I don't know, is that interesting? Any thoughts about that?
I think like of course like a company at a startup stage or initial stages where they maybe don't have a lot of customers or that's they won't be doing this. Even if I would say um, I think like once you have started having multiple teams, multiple engineering teams, let's say different pods kind of a system where
Yeah.
sometimes the information is scattered between teams, and you don't know, like when a fire is there, you don't know who to say, like who to contact. I think that's the beginning of it. And as slightly, I think the teams start to mature and the companies start to mature. I think that's the right time to sort of start these processes.
Yeah, I think maturity is really the key word there because
Yeah,
it takes, you have to have multiple layers of maturity there. You have to have a product that's mature enough
yeah,
to be tested, but you also have to have maturity in your leadership team where they recognize and understand the value of saying, "Hey, we're not shipping new features this week. We're not shipping shiny
yeah.
new buttons. We're actually going to take the time and effort to see what it takes to break our system."
Yeah, I think like probably a company having a launching new things or launching a new product in maybe a week or so. I think people do dog fooding. They can add this maybe incident response or as a part of it, so that how your team would be reacting on day one, day zero, one and two. So, like I think it like generally sometimes even the managers or the management kind of starts to realize, hey, like now we are spending a lot of time on these incidents itself. Like our delivery for other important stuff is also getting impacted. So now we should find time to set some process time for this, so that like we get these incidents get at least mitigated, so that we can have a longer time for our own features also. It's always about finding that right balance. Even engineering managers, or I believe, have a tough time to sort of sometimes justify a lot of spending a lot of time for these kind of things. Like it's always, I think that's probably their always conundrum they are in. Which part to spend time on. So I think they have to take such decisions at the end.
I'm like stifling, maybe laughing here because I feel like I have so many previous traumatic experiences of some sort of on-call event. That's on
Yeah,
one side. And the other side, you said it's like, oh well, the product manager needs to prioritize his effectiveness. But like, I want to
yeah,
hire that PM that actually is like, you know what, our incidents are impacting our future profitability. So we
right.
should actually take a look at it, improving our. So like, I've never heard that. I've never heard anyone on that side ever
Yeah,
say that.
yeah,
Like it's always the other way. Like, oh, we don't need to worry about that. It's done, right? We finish that
right.
code and push it out. We don't need to improve it anymore.
I think like the first part is always about having that right report, or having some sort of information, so that you can act. Like maybe hey, these are incidents, these are repeatable incidents. These are the probably, if you have some sort of a, let's say, a business impact to it, maybe show them their numbers and say like, this is the impact, and if you want to sort of reduce that numbers of business impact, then we need this process. I think, as you said, like it's always a hard time to justify spending time on these things, but if you have that data would be, I think, anyway useful.
I mean, this is where like Dora is super successful, where we come in with mean time to resolution and change failure rate, and so falling back on those statistics can be really helpful in the conversation to convince people that these aren't industry standard that we have. Like
Yeah.
every single pull request we push out results in a bug in production.
That's job
Right.
security, right?
Right.
I
100%.
would imagine that most companies' onboarding experience to incident response is a result of hitting a breaking point where they've
Yeah.
had just outage after outage after outage, and finally they're like, okay, we have to do something different, which is probably what leads them to you. Would that be a fair statement?
Yeah. I think like one is what you say, like having outages after outages, and the other part is, even if, let's say, they want to sort of streamline some process, usually they see like maybe on-call is confused what to do, or maybe the on-call is late to react, or the manager doesn't know what's happening, or someone does not even know how to report an incident, for example. So there are different aspects to it. I always say like I think the entire incident response is part of two parts. One is the trigger, or how you're creating that incident, like what's the trigger for that, and then how you're responding to that, which is like debugging, communicating, and then the post-mortem of it. So so that's where we kind of try to come in, like sort of you can streamline that entire pipeline of it, like make it as quick as possible, make it visible across maybe stakeholders, maybe support across engineering teams, and having that post-mortem analysis processes in place. So it, like I think, we come in when teams recognize, hey, like, too many repeated incidents or too many of these stuff, and whoever is the on-call is kind of feeling very confused about the state of things. So that's where we have seen a lot of companies reaching out to us.
Yeah, you mentioned the stakeholders there, and I think that's a really cool thing to dive into for a minute, because communication is
Yeah,
one of the key things of incident response, and it's the one I always hated the most early on in my
yeah,
career, because I would be in an incident and then everyone wants to know what's going on. Well, I'm working on
yeah,
it, damn it, but I can't
yeah,
work on it if you're sitting here hounding me with questions. And so I think a key part of a solid incident response plan is having a communication plan so
uh,
that you can relay that information out and free up the people actually working on the incident to continue working on it. How do you recommend addressing that?
so like I would say, like an on-call is a person who is always on fire, who has to a mitigate the issue. I think that's the number one priority, and everyone recognizes that. But because of the environment, he needs to do a lot of other things also. Like communicate to the customer support also. What message, or what's the estimated time of resolution. Probably communicate to product manager, like, hey, this is probably the impact. Like maybe these many user, this much subscriptions are being impacted right now. So so that's the major pain point the on-call person has. What's the way? The best way is to delegate a lot of these stuff, or maybe have a system which is which is visible to the stakeholders, so that they don't ping the on-call, or they don't kind of ask him again and again, hey, what's the update. One of the ways we do via pagerly is we leverage Slack as a major part of the incident response. So let's say we create a Slack channel for each incident, and in the Slack channel you can see, what's the ETA, what's the business impact, or maybe some bit of information. This is like some bit of it is updated by the on-call, but nobody is like asking the on-call again and again, hey, what's the ETA, what's the impact. Let's say a product manager wants to see, they can go to the channel and see it. Customer support can see it. So like 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 whatever, or let's say if someone wants to send an email, no one, like with pagerly, like they can just send all that information with email also, whatever the stakeholders that the company has. So whatever kind of the actions on call has to do apart from mitigation is an additional effort, and whatever tools and resources they can utilize to sort of delegate and automate it would be much more helpful. And so that his major sort of brain focus is always on mitigating the issue as quickly as possible.
Yeah, I mean, I think having those additional things in place once you've identified them to help streamline the process are super important.
Yeah,
Like we've got status dashboards that we can point
yeah,
customers to immediately. So rather than trying to explain where the updates are going to be or how they're going to happen, and you just go to
right,
this URL and stuff is there. But I mean, I think also as customers of SaaS solutions, we have like an opportunity to even be nicer to companies that are having incidents. I mean, I think there's an emoji dedicated to this, hug ops, right? When something's happening, pass on the empathy a little bit. Like I care way more about as a customer that you tell me that that there's a problem that someone's looking at, rather than being
right.
like, oh, we don't know, I don't know what's going on, or even someone's looking at it. Like I much prefer to be told, oh yeah, like we'll have an update in an hour, than oh, this is exactly what's happening at this moment. Like I don't care about that. I want to know, when's the next update going to be happening, more so than
Right.
play by play.
Right, right. Like there are two. I'll say like always there are two types of communication. One internally and externally. Both has to be, I think, correct. Uh, Externally more because you have the stake, like you have the ultimate stakeholders there. But like both needs to be always updated. Both needs to be always to the point, so that like because in any of these communication, if there's any miscommunication happening, then it will just prolong the incident much longer. So I totally agree with you.
It reminds me of the AWS status pages early in the days of AWS, like was always green. Like I would have put money that it was just a green icon there and there were no other options available because it was always green.
Right, right. I remember at that time. I think like I usually didn't sort of had a lot of confidence on that. I like down detector or some other, or even Twitter was much more sort of a better way to know okay, there's a like actually a major issue there, and those status pages were like not at all properly. And, like I think things have changed, but not up to that mark.
You bring up Twitter though, and that's a really good point. I mean, I think for a lot of tech oriented companies, that's a primary communication channel,
Yeah,
sending out notifications on Twitter or X
yeah,
and relaying information that way. And also like it's kind of sad to say, but that's also a good notification method of whenever your customers think something's going on wrong.
Was what it was.
Us.
But I mean, there enough that I saw some products that specifically are like we go around to social media and get the up real time status from
yeah,
potential users complaining because it's another source that you're not tapping into to
yeah.
actually let you know if customers have a problem. You know, they're not necessarily reporting it back to you. This is their report mechanism.
Right.
Right. I think down detector or these tools kind of work that way only. Uh,
That's a good point.
I think yeah, and I think the companies I think have started to put RSS feeds also, like I think for a longer time, and I think they have integrations with those feeds onto their Twitter accounts or maybe some other tools, maybe let's say Discord, if they are doing like a SaaS kind of a product or something like that, so that like their customers are also updated via these platforms.
I mean, accuracy though is what you're bringing up, Will, and I feel like there's a huge challenge there, realistically, to like what makes sense to even talk about, and what should be intermittent, hidden failures from an internal company standpoint. Like, I don't want to see Amazon just being red all the time because some node in CloudFront failed
Yeah,
one request because the connection didn't go through. Like, how does that help? So I mean, I feel like or yellow all the time because there's always something that's probably
yeah,
possibly problematic. So I think a single color there is wrong, is always
yeah.
wrong.
Right, right. I think like, and that's why I think if you see AWS, they have over the period of time they have evolved their status page. Earlier, like now they have actually region wise also. I think they are also started to do for I saw for some of the services they have started to do more granular scoping as much as possible. So, like, let's say even for Slack also, like earlier they used to do only for messages. If your workspace is working fine, they have now started to do for APIs and like even login has been different. So every bit of different they have started to do so that like you don't have a, like a yellow for maybe just a small issue in a or maybe just a small service in a small region. So if that detail page is more if that status page is more sort of detailed, then I think it probably helps to sort of give the right information.
I mean, I actually think AWS went a lot further here. They have something called the health dashboard, which
Yeah, now
figures
yeah,
out what services you're actually using and how that could be impacted you, and then actually have messages there, which I mean is really what we all actually care about, right? You know, is there something happening at this moment which actually affects us that could be
right,
interesting? Realistically, if we saw a problem, does this explain it?
right, absolutely.
So one thing we haven't talked about a lot is the post-mortem. And I feel
Yeah,
like that's a just like that is as much work as doing the incident response itself, but sometimes gets overlooked because it's no longer a priority. Like once the incident is no longer an incident, you have to just be disciplined enough to run through the post-mortem
yeah,
process.
yeah.
How do you approach that?
I think like the postmortem is like, I would say, like a cherry on top in terms of the grunt work. Like you have, you are doing a sleepless night, you're going through the incident, you have maybe fixed it also, but now you need to present like postmortem. And like at Disney, we used to have like a day, max to max a day, or even less than a day to come with that postmortem document, because they were kind of very bullish on that. Like, hey, like we want to know what caused the issue, so that like we can fix it by tomorrow itself. So that like I would say like that's where the gap is. Like that's where a lot of people drop, where they don't want to do that work, especially after a grueling period of incident resolving process. So, but I think it's just about more of an education part, or more of a realizing what you have learned from your incident resolving part. Like uh, you have probably a team has resolved a lot of incidents, but if they have not learned anything from that, then it's pretty much wasteful, because tomorrow similar or probably same incident would occur probably in a different team, or in your team itself. So like I think the value of the postmortem needs to be told pretty clearly, and it's a very clear proposition. I always feel like if you tell the engineer, if you tell like hey, what we don't want is to you spending this much amount of time again on a similar thing next week. So that's where postmortem can help. So I think telling that value is pretty much, I think it's important.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the really big values of using an incident response tool is it will collect all of those data points and help you more
Yeah,
easily see that you're having this common failure
yeah, yeah.
over and over again, that otherwise, if you're just tracking this in like Google Docs or whatever, you wouldn't actually see that correlation.
Yeah, I think it needs to start with what information you are filling. So like even visually, what we kind of help is to do the five whys. What went well, what, first of all, what happened, then what went well, what did not go well, what we can do to mitigate, or in future. So like having those information in place is pretty much is the first step, so that you have the right way to analyze stuff. Even the timelines part. So if you have if you want to do the Slack conversations, or if you want to do want to see what happened from when this incident was triggered till the resolve, that timeline also helps you a lot, so that where a lot of time was being spent, or if there's like a gap in the communication process, that is also kind of visible from there. Or what are the tickets, or what are the action items that you have created out of it. So there are, like I'd say, a lot of information in that postmortem document that can help you to analyze a lot of things. And most of the times we have seen it's usually a communication error that is happening generally. Let's say you didn't tell the team to hey, our API versions are updated, so you need to update. So things like that are the most common issues. So probably you set up a process around that to next time if you upgrade a version, that notification is sent to the different teams. So but every bit of this is always and always you get these results or these drills only after you have that document which has that entire information in place. So and you can sort of add those action items also, maybe like a short term action item or long term action item, and that really helps. And the other part is to follow this up. So like you create these documents, you probably have meetings also, but after that you need to sort of follow those action items also to the last bit, like until those tickets are closed. You need to follow that up, because otherwise this entire process becomes useless. So following that part to the very end is also pretty much important.
I heard a spicy take recently, and I wanna lay this on you. Um, every incident could have bed prevented if you just had the right test.
No, I think every incident, as I would say, like most of the cases that we have seen, is usually the communication part. Like that's the most common thing that we have observed. Uh, like I think I remember a case like Terraform has a lot of issues. Everyone like kind of has a different story to it, but
No
we
argument
like we
here.
no argument. So we like one time what we saw is like if we update the security groups via Terraform, what
Yeah.
AWS was doing was like it removes the security groups first. Like let's say if I want to add a security group, it removes the security group first, the existing one, and then it adds the list. Even though I'm adding up just a one group, for example, as an example. Now what happened was in the meantime when it's removing those security groups, service was down. Like the service was down for let's say 2 3 minutes. Now
Yeah.
this is something that we kind of like that happened to our team, and that's a potentially ticking bomb which can actually happen anytime to across any teams. So even if we just communicate like hey like this is what we have seen, this is what we had experienced, and if we just relate to the all the engineering teams, that issue would not occur. So that's usually the cases we have seen. Like if even if the communication is proper, I'd say like 60 to 70% of times incidents won't occur.
I still can't get over the fact that Terraform does that by default. Like it seems like something that no one in their right mind would have designed to have the default be first delete all of the resources and then recreate them. I mean, that just seems like it just seems backwards to me. Like, isn't the common wisdom in operations to okay, first we'll create the new things, make sure that it works, and then switch over to it? Why is the default delete? I don't know. I maybe I just need enough coffee or something, and someone and it'll just magically insight will come to me.
Maybe that's a AWS thing. We don't know. Like I don't remember,
No,
where.
because like cloud formation and CDK and everything like
Okay,
that, it's not. It's just the order in which the SDK is being executed. There's no fundamental reason why it has to be that way.
okay.
I want to
Let
come
me
back to
clarify this.
your spicy take, Warren. Um, every outage could be eliminated or avoided with the right test. I mean, I think in theory that's true, but the practical steps of executing that make it not the right answer for a lot of people. But I think it does highlight something that I don't think I've ever talked about in terms of incident response with anyone before, and that's identifying what your risk tolerance is. Because for a lot of companies, having some downtime is really not a big deal. In other companies, it is a big deal. Like I worked for a while in a medical company where downtime for us meant that patients could potentially die. So we were kind of risk averse there. But in other places, I worked for a company that built a fitness app. If we were down, somebody had to figure out how to use the treadmill on their own. I think they're going to be okay. But like in
That
those
could be
two
life. That could be
extremes,
life or death, though. Also,
right? Yeah, but in those two extremes, there's a different risk tolerance for how much downtime you're willing to take, and I think that is
Yeah,
probably something that maybe needs to be talked about more by companies when deciding how much downtime we want.
I mean,
yeah.
my
I
bed's
think
down every weekend.
Right.
I think in both. I think even in the downtime, as well as I think it brings to a point also about alert fatigue or on-call fatigue. Like
Yeah.
people kind of have very lower thresholds for a lot of things, and over the time they realize like probably we don't need a lot of lower thresholds. So like I think alert fatigue generally happens when teams are starting to have their on-call process in place. They put alerts on a bunch of things, and over the time they realize, hey, like probably we don't need this alert, or that is probably not needed, or we can raise the threshold. So like in PagerDuty, we also provide these values. Like you can annotate alerts to sort of analyze and probably reduce some of the alerts that you don't even need, or you can probably increase thresholds. So similarly for probably incidents also, you can define or change your threshold values over the period of time. Some companies can afford to have incident response only during let's say business hours. They can afford to maybe don't do it during weekends or night times. But some companies can't afford for even a minute. So absolutely depends on company to company, type of product or type of service they're providing.
Yeah, I mean, I think the same thing with like the dependabot alerts from a security standpoint, which in my domain we talk
Yeah,
about a lot. Like how much do you want, right? Like how
yeah.
much is important, how much
How
is
much is
relevant for you, and maybe the Pagerly and et al. Help you actually identify after the fact how much you have, and then to Will's point, the ROI is super critical to actually evaluate because trying to actually sort of duplicate production in a way to actually test to see what happens at that scale at that moment. And there's no way
yeah,
with cloud providers to uh, well practice what does capacity constrained look like in that environment. I mean, if you're capacity constrained because there isn't another bare metal device available, there's no there's no alternative.
yeah,
Oh well,
yeah.
we should be multi-cloud provider. Like, is never the answer.
Yeah, 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 yeah. I mean, you can have, backup DRs also. You can have as much
Yeah.
redundancy as possible, but like, there's no sort of answer, like end to it, of course.
Yeah, there are some things like actually pick what your SLO is going to be, what your objective is going to be for uptime or incidents, and then make sure your strategy actually includes that and handles it, and then measure it based off of the number of incidents you get, rather than saying, "Oh yeah, we should know when the memory goes above 90%," because then it's bad apparently.
Yeah, 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 yeah. I think it always, gets updated. It always gets, with the time, it probably your product is growing, your customers are growing, so it kind of get
Yeah,
updated with every passage of time.
yeah.
So, what's your top tips for someone who is not satisfied with their current incident response,
I
program or software?
I would say like I think the entire pipeline. I think like you can always see different parts to it. First part is the how easily your team or anyone is able to report the incident. So yes, you have automated alerts on DBs or on from EC2s and all of those parts. But let's say not everything can be automated. You need to have correct way of identify of reporting issues. So if you have customer support, or if you have a product team, or let's say someone want, even if let's say if you have dev environments or pre-prod environments, you want to report issues there, you need to have a good way of reporting that, and hope and have a process that the correct the issue is reported to the correct team as quickly as possible. So time to trigger the incident, or time to you call that on call is should be as quickly as possible. So identify the blockages in that. There can be blockages in in setting this process also. And the other part is, let's say once the incident has been triggered or created, what to do. So if you feel like, if the on calls feel like a lot of work outside mitigation, if they feel like if every time you are having an incident, if you are just running around and probably adding calling people, and just figuring out, hey, what's the status, or adding other team on calls all the time, figure out these kind of blockages in your processes and try to streamline as much as possible, so that like on call or whoever is other stakeholders can focus on solving as much as possible. If you want to have like a if that is still like taking a lot of time, maybe set up like a team of an IMOC person who is actually handling all the incidents, and he or she is actually dispatching the incidents to the correct team and doing like a supervision of the entire process. And the last part is to see whether are you doing the postmortems correctly, like are you doing it at all or not, are you actually learning the learning from your incidents, have your repeated incidents have reduced over the time or not. I say like that's the most material. A lot of companies kind of focus on MTTR. I think that's not probably the right metric. As the right metric is to see how many unique incidents you are getting. I think if if that is fine, that's fine. But if you're getting the repeated incidents time after time, something you could which you could have avoided, then their incident response process is like the postmodern process is broken in that sense.
That's
Oh,
interesting.
yeah. It's a good point.
I mean, I really wonder how many, like, are people hitting the same incident over and over again? Like, my guess would be probably not exactly, but maybe correct categorization would really help spill it. Like, you know,
Yeah,
is it the same part of your framework, code base, or a component? You know, if you have even a monolith and not microservices, you still have
yeah,
broken out components. You can at least target it down to, is it the same component that's causing the
yeah.
problem all the time? As far as a place to look and invest in, rather than, oh, you know, it's just something happening within our whole system.
Right. Like I think, or maybe did the on-call have the run book for when he was solving an incident? Is do they had the right tools for just seeing, or probably the particular service doesn't even have a dashboard, or doesn't have any playbook to so that which can help on-call. So there are, like, I think, a lot of learnings which any or any engineering team can do, and see how much, like, I think at the end it's all about how much we can help the on-call person as much as possible.
Hmm.
So yeah,
I mean, if we're seeing the same incident over and over again, we should at least be able to brag about our mean time to resolution decreasing because everybody instantly knows which service to restart.
But maybe that's a good point, though, right? Maybe that's the whole point, right? Like, you don't want to have that actually decreasing, because then
Right.
then there's, like,
that's
you know, it really points to a different problem. It's like, if you have run books, you must be because you hit the same problem over and over again.
yeah,
And
yeah,
so rather than having the run book, it'd be better to eliminate where the source of the problem is coming from.
right. And that's why I think there's a, like, a very, like, I'm saying, not like, I think there's always divided opinion on whether how good is a MTTR metric. Like, do
Hmm.
you actually want to, like, trust on it, like, because it's usually counterintuitive if you see, like, as you rightly said, let's say a company has resolved most of the incidents, like they have resolved it to the correct point, let's say in the 6 months of time. In the seventh month, the engineering team doesn't have the same incidents or similar incidents, but they have only one new incident which kind of took a long time because that was like a unique incident. So in that case, the MTTR is too big because a new incident came with a lower frequency, little lower number of times, but it took a longer time. But can we say that the engineering team had a bad state of incidents hygiene? No, because, like, they had kind of resolved most of the incidents that have occurred in the past, and those are not occurring now. This is like a new one. So that's why I think, like, MTDR is always not the right metric to see, uh, in terms of incident hygiene.
Yeah, I think the error budget, according to your SLO, is a much better one in this regard.
Yeah,
Unfortunately, yeah, but I'm totally with. I mean, I think that all the door metrics sort of have that problem in a way. If you measure them purely or just in
purely. Yeah,
general, rather than how they're actually relevant. Like, I remember working with one company that they were measuring even cycle time, but they were using feature flags and not including that in the cycle time. So I'm like, yeah, your code's
yeah.
going to production, but no one's using it. So what's the point? What's the
What's the
point? I
point?
mean,
What's the point?
yeah, I mean, then also measure the cycle, like the cycle time on feature flag removal. That's going to tell you a lot more about your success.
Right. I think, like, we have seen a lot of tools on Dora also. We have seen a
Yeah.
lot of tools on maybe just how many commits you have pushed. So I think everything has to be, read with a lot of context, with a lot of nuances also, not just the number as it, like, because it can change based on a different kind of things that are happening.
Yeah. I know we're getting close to the limit on the time that you've got with us today. Maybe there's some last words, and then we can move over to picks. Anything you want to share?
No, I think, like, this was, I think, pretty cool. Like, I think, like, with Pagerly also we have seen a lot of different and unique cases. Like, and it's good. Like, this is something that which is very close to what we have seen, like, what we have felt, and, like, it's been good. Like to help companies to sort of streamline. this entire process as much as possible.
It's got to be super interesting too to see how companies' incidents actually look like.
Oh, for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I think like what we have realized is like every company needs their kind of like every company has different processes, probably because
Yeah,
of the state of their product, the state of
yeah,
their org size, and what we have always ensured is like whatever your process or whatever you feel like is the most apt, will not force a tool on that. Like we'll adapt to your kind of processes. We'll just make it more automated, more streamlined, because we know like you have set up some way. Even your engineering team is being set up in a certain way, and we know like you know the sort of some of the bits and pieces of it. So there's no one particular way of doing things, but whatever it may be, we'll help you with that.
well said, well said.
Yeah.
So what do you think, Will? Should we do the picks?
Let's do some picks.
Okay. I know you put me on the spot anyway, so I'll just go first. My my pick for today's session is a book called Radical Focus by, I think it's Christina Wadke. It's absolutely fantastic. It's a hypothetical story about how to actually set priorities using OKRs or KPIs or whatever,
Hmm.
MBI, whatever you want to call them, honestly, and how not to do it and lessons learned from that. It's super relevant no matter what level you're at. Realistically, like even at the team level, it's super interesting to think about like how many priorities and what should our focus be and how to think
Hmm.
about that. Because I've seen so many teams, so many companies have like, oh yeah, we have 10 initiatives for this quarter, and I'm like, you can't. I bet your engineers couldn't even tell you 5 of them. Like it's just too many. And I think it's a great story about how to actually think about this and what's relevant. So highly recommended.
Dude, your picks are always so relevant. I feel like mine are just like, "Dur, dur, dur," but yours are like, oh, wow, that could actually work and be helpful.
Yeah.
I
Mm.
mean, I don't know. Maybe I'm being lazy by picking easy things. I don't. Well, when I'm year two of a host here, maybe I'll run out of things, and then I'll be on to the, uh, I don't know, my weights that I've got in my other room that I'm using.
Interesting.
All right, Falit, what'd you bring for us for a pick today?
I There are a couple of things. One, I think one I've seen like a documentary recently, which was on how Toyota build stuff. And one of the things was pretty interesting. I'm forgetting what they call it, but essentially what they say is, and the Toyota is like known for its like building bug-free products always.
Lean
They
manufacturing, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, yeah. And one of the things that they have always is like no matter where their manufacturing units are, no matter where what they say, if there is an issue, it gets reported to the topmost tier
Yeah,
like immediately, like with proper clarity, and
yeah.
and and that's how I think like communication becomes so much important, and like that kind of solves a lot of things. So like it I think, and it's just very fascinating how kind of they build products
They
on that.
actually have these like cords on the manufacturing floor called andon lines that they'll
Yeah,
pull,
I
and
know
it'll
lines. Yeah,
immediately
yeah.
stop the whole manufacturing line at once. Hey,
Yes.
no more pull requests at this moment for the whole company because there's
Yes.
something critically wrong going on. Like, could you imagine?
Yeah, 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 yeah. I think I know what line was I was referring to, and that's super, super. I think that's such a simple kind of technique that any company can sort of have. Like I believe, like such a simple process, but very effective.
Yeah, one of my customers was a company that provided seats to Toyota. And it was wild because they would get orders like, okay, we need 317 seats that are beige delivered at 10:27 a.m. Like the
Oh,
level of
fantastic.
specificity, because they have that just in time manufacturing. They're like, we need these at 10:27 a.m. And this was a smaller company, so like the
Yeah.
level of pressure for them to meet those requirements was just through the roof.
I mean, it makes a lot of sense too if you think about it because they see inventory storage as a waste
Right.
as a cost to them, and so they don't want to have it stored at anyway. You're the inventory for them, so
Right.
they're going to the shelf and they're pulling it, and you are that shelf for them.
Yeah.
No, it's awesome.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Cool. So I feel like, we were talking about this before we started recording about how my picks are just kind of out there. I feel like this one is going to be, unlike the crazy scale, this one's going to be hard to top. And yeah, I'll just get to it. So I read this book. I just finished it up a couple days ago, called The Sacred Mushroom and the Cross by a guy named John Marco Allegro. And I would be tempted to call bullshit on the book right away, except for the fact that this guy spent 15 years deciphering the Dead Sea Scrolls. And so if you're not familiar with the Dead Sea Scrolls, it's a set of scrolls that were found in Egypt, I believe, in the 1940s, that were thousands of years old, and they contain some parts of the New Testament Bible, but they also had other stories in there as well that weren't included in there. And so he deciphered them. But this book, The Sacred Mushroom and the Cross, he basically goes through this book showing or arguing that a lot of the stuff written in the Old Testament and the New Testament and some other religious books as well were not factual based, but they were actually like a play on words referencing psychedelic mushrooms, and that the whole religion is based on an ancient cult or ancient culture that worshipped psychedelic mushrooms. And it's a wild read, man. It's very hard to read because of all the references he makes to like the Aramaic and the Semitic languages. But the big takeaway for me was, you're reading through this and he's like, oh, so well, they said this thing, and that's actually the the ancient Sumerian word for this psychedelic mushroom, and like everything points back to being the name of a psychedelic mushroom. And I was like, dude, how is it that we know so little about the ancient Sumerians, but the 400 different words they had for psychedelic mushrooms? But then at the end of this book, there's like a chapter. I couldn't figure out who wrote this last chapter because it wasn't John Allegro. It was someone else. But the guy was talking with his wife. She was from Russia, and they came across a field with a bunch of mushrooms, and he's like, he was an American. He's like, no, don't eat those. They're all poisonous and stuff. And she's like, no, this one is this, this, and this. And so it turns out in Russian, they have like an endless number of words for mushroom. But in the US and in Western cultures, we have, like 3 like toadstools, mushrooms, and whatever else. So
that's a European thing, because people actually go pick mushrooms here, and so knowing which ones are poisonous. The same thing, once I've moved here, I learned all about that. But I think you've memed yourself, Will, because now I see, instead of just this, but instead of aliens, now it's mushrooms, right? Like
was it aliens the last one? Like,
no, it's the guy from the Ancient Aliens TV show with the big hair. If you've ever seen that meme.
There's the History Channel. There's Ancient Aliens, and yeah, it's like the pyramids are landing platforms for aliens, and Will's here, trying to sell us on the fact that
okay, got it.
The religious cult is of mushrooms. I mean,
yeah,
good read. I added it to my list, so thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, let me know when you get through it. I'd be interested to talk through that with you, because there's like some parts of it you're like, okay, I see how you can get to that conclusion, and there's other parts where you're like, come on.
So is it like pretty like famous kind of a book? Like, is it like?
It was written. I think it's recently. It was published in 1970. So it's an older book. And then he got a lot of hatred, and supposedly it was very detrimental to his career. Go figure.
Oh, yeah.
Who would have thought that claiming Jesus was a psychedelic mushroom would be detrimental to your career. But anyway, but I think it's gained in popularity over the last couple of years just because of the shift in the things that we're seeing, at least here in the Western world, where people are kind of changing their opinion and approach to things like to natural medicines like psychedelic mushrooms, and the
Got it.
legalization of pot. And now in Oregon and Colorado, there's actually um, decriminalized centers for using mushrooms to treat like PTSD and memory issues and things like that.
You're really close to
Interesting.
Canada, where that's been a huge topic in the last 5, 10 years.
Yeah, yeah. So I think
Interesting.
that's been a key to the book gaining new popularity.
Interesting. Really interesting.
Yeah. All right. So there you go. So now the challenge is on next week. What am I going to come with a pick that tops Jesus as a mushroom?
I actually saw one movie which is on my mind is Inside Out 2. I saw I think last night, and I think it like blew me away. I think like if someone wants to like, I highly recommend watching. Like I think you can sort of feel a lot of emotions for from the movie. Um, that is something which is like just on my mind freshly.
And what was the name of that one?
Inside Out, the second part,
Inside Out.
which yeah,
Right on.
really
Right
really
on.
nice.
Awesome.
Hmm.
And with that done, I think we have an episode. Falit, thanks for joining us, man. This has been a blast. Really appreciate having you on the show.
It's been great.
Thank you. Yeah, I think same as I think it's been really great. Had a like wonderful time just to chat about incidents and a lot of other things and sharing each other's personal experiences. I think this is something like every on call, every or even every developer has their own personal experience what they want to share. So it's been a really good chat.
Awesome. Cool. Thank you again. And to all the listeners, thank you for listening. Appreciate y'all. And be sure and hit us up if there's anything we can do for you. And we'll see y'all next week.
Thank you.